Hey guys, we just did the least lit live stream ever from Mongsha Airport, and our live streaming audience bullied us into watching the latest video from Unnatural Vegan, which is a response to Edwin's generation, which is a response to the fact that this guy calls himself vegan, but he does eat meat once in a while, so maybe he is in fact a freegan or a reducitarian or what have you.
Right. Yes.
Melissa can jump in at any time. I have very, very little to say about this matter. As always, I'm really kind of just disappointed in the intellectual caliber of what Unnatural Vegan has to say about this. She behaves as if there's some kind of theoretically sophisticated point to be made here, and I just don't feel that there is. Whenever we get into, I think, shades of gray territory with veganism, one of the useful rhetorical devices is to compare this to what questions would you be asking about cannibalism. No, I mean that sincerely. I don't mean that in like a catty, shallow, down-to-earth way. Here's a really good parallel to bring in. I mean, it's totally not comparable in any way, but we can call it a parallelism.
Yeah.
You know, Mod Vegan was asking me by email. Shout out to Margaret, Mod Vegan, another YouTuber. She emailed me asking my position on flesh created in a laboratory, like in a vat, through modern, brand new biotechnology.
Yeah,
right?
I was just saying this on live stream. The other day my aunt sent me a link to Memphis Meats.
Right.
And she said, Melissa, check this out. You can eat meat again.
Right.
And I was just like,
well,
no.
in the future.
Like, yeah. Right.
At some point in the future, you'll be able to eat. Right. So
yeah, number one is just disgusting health-wise. You know, it's
But here's my point. In terms of a quick way to deal with this, in terms of rhetoric, this is rhetoric as opposed to philosophy, how we talk about these things. Well, if you could create human flesh in a laboratory, in a vat, would you engage in cannibalism? So that would be victimless cannibalism.
Yeah.
You know? Now, I agree. If you have created human flesh in a laboratory through this kind of technology, cloning technology or biotechnology, what do they actually call cultured meat?
Yeah.
This kind of thing. I certainly agree ethically it's completely different from murdering someone to make, I don't know, to eat them. You know, it is different. But on the other hand, of course, it is still cannibalism. So I think it is in exactly that way. I think it's useful to, you know, bring into this context. I don't have a total moral opposition to people eating fake cow meat created in a vat in a laboratory through biotech. You know, I understand that is something very different. However, I would never do it. And I can't imagine any compelling argument why I should do it. You know, there's, in terms of human health and in terms of so many things. And also, you know, I don't know why people are so contentious with this issue of finding something disgusting. I think in many cases we find things disgusting for a reason.
Yeah.
Maybe not all cases. But if I say to you, would you eat a human arm that was produced in a laboratory? A human arm with fingernails and a bone and everything. And it's pulled out of a vat. It's cultured meat. It was never part of a living person. This person wasn't born and they weren't died. They might say, oh, that's disgusting. Well, we can examine that. Why do they find it disgusting? Is it for absolutely no reason? Is this something completely irrational? Or is the argument to the contrary irrational? But sure, I mean, obviously, it's going to be progress for the vegan movement when we can detach the production of meat from the slaughter of animals. That's going to be an unbelievable change in human civilization.
Absolutely.
And of course, I welcome it. But on the other hand, if you're talking about my personal ethics and my personal identity, one of the reasons why I don't eat meat is because I don't want to be the kind of person who eats meat. I mean, I'm going to come back to that in just a minute here. One of the reasons why I don't engage in cannibalism is because I don't want to be a cannibal. You know, this actually has some significance, even if it's a victimless crime, even if you're eating human flesh which didn't kill someone, or even if the person gave their consent to be eaten after their death, and they then die of natural causes, which actually there is a legal precedent for. I remember reading about a case going through the courts where a person agreed to be eaten, you know, the way they explicitly arranged. I'm sorry, this is life on Earth in the 21st century. If you Google it, I'm sure you can find a bunch. It's probably not unique. Probably there have been several cases in the court that way, right? So I think there still is something significant about refusing to be a cannibal, unless you're in one of those desert island scenarios, unless your airplane has crashed in the Hebrides. And, you know, we all know there are those bizarre scenarios where it's cannibalism or death. But even then, we probably have to ask ourselves whether or not cannibalism is a fate worse than death. So, look, I just say, in general, I think the comparison to cannibalism is often a useful way to frame the discussion if and when you get into an apparent gray area about veganism. So in this case, there's, I think, a fake gray area created about veganism, defined in terms of whether or not you pay for the food. Now, I do think that paying for food is significant economically and morally and personally. I do feel very differently about it. I mean, the other day we ate dinner with some of my bosses, some of my employers and coworkers, and they were paying for their own food, and they paid for meat. I would feel very differently about it if I were the one paying for that meal, like a group meal of people. I would refuse to buy meat for other people.
Yeah,
and I have been put in that position where people expect you to, you know. And it's rough as a vegan. It's not nice. It's not great to tell your boss, no, I'm not going to pay for your meal. You know, so this is in China, but it could be similar in Western culture. No, I'm not going to. It's actually, I think it's immoral for me to, because you ordered meat. You know, so you know those are difficult situations. So I'm not going to say that the question of paying for something or not paying for something is of trivial significance or that it's irrelevant. It is of some significance. But again, in the same way that I think this question of cannibalism is still of some significance, even if the arm comes out of a vat, this question of eating meat. One of the reasons why I don't eat meat is because I want to be the kind of person who refuses to eat meat. One of the reasons why I live my life in a kind of simple, morally consistent way is because I don't want to be inconsistent. And that's most of what they get into, where they start to pretend this is something theoretically sophisticated, is to get into these sorts of quiddities of, well, in this scenario, would you do X or Y? You're sitting at a dinner table with other people, and they ordered meat, and the meat will go to waste, the meat will go into the garbage. Would you prefer to eat that meat rather than see it go to waste or go into the garbage, this kind of thing? Well, then you're a person who's making a bunch of complex excuses for what could be a very simple moral position, you know? I've said this a long time ago. In a lot of contexts, in real life cooperation and work with your friends and colleagues, what we mean by sanity is often very close to reliability. Whether or not a person's reliable, whether or not you can count on them, that counts for a lot. That matters a lot, and it's very close to what someone's saying. Being someone who's reliable, and I don't even mean accountable, but someone whose morality makes sense to the society around you. It makes sense to yourself. It's coherent. It doesn't have these kinds of exceptions. That's worth something to me, So anyway, sorry. From my perspective, there is nothing complex about this. I guess the illusion is that there's something immoral about rotten meat being put in a dumpster. And I don't see it that way at all. Like, to me, that would be the same as justifying cannibalism by claiming there's something immoral about a human corpse being buried in the earth and thus going to waste as opposed to being eaten. I don't see it as immoral to put expired cheese in the dumpster. Put expired cheese in the dumpster. That's where it belongs.
Yeah.
I don't think you're doing something morally positive by rescuing that cheese from the dumpster or by rescuing meat from going into the dumpster. In the same sense, I don't think you're doing something morally positive by rescuing a corpse from the burial ground and engaging in cannibalism, although that also could be justified as having some kind of positive ecological benefit, as avoiding food waste, as avoiding greenhouse gas emissions, and all these other things that people have kind of thrown in to complicate the matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know Unnatural Vegan made the point that Edwin's generation should be praised because even though he wants to eat meat, he decides not to most of the time. And I don't see, this comparison is useful. Like, what if somebody wanted to eat human flesh, but because they know it's wrong, they decide not to? Should we be praising them? Should we really?
Yeah. I mean, obviously comparisons are odious, but that was an especially bizarre part of her statement. And, I said, well, what about the comparison to rape, which many vegans make? Well, you think someone is more praiseworthy because they want to commit crimes, whether it's rape or murder or cannibalism or what have you, and they either hold back from it or only engage in it when it's in this sense facilitated for them by someone else's unethical behavior. Because the fundamental situation here is you're sitting at a table, and
somebody else orders meat.
Somebody else commits an unethical act, which again could be comparable to someone killing someone so they can engage in cannibalism or whatever comparison you want to make, and then you are free riding on their unethical act. You're taking advantage of, you're opportunistically taking advantage of their unethical act, and you're considering that to be morally neutral on your own part, or Unnatural Vegan says morally praiseworthy.
Yeah, right.
Because this is something you really desire to do, but you repress that desire more than other. It's bizarre. Yeah. It's completely bizarre to me.
Yeah. And you also made the point that Unnatural Vegan says that we shouldn't be shaming these people. Why not? Why shouldn't you shame them?
What are you going to be ashamed of in this life, if not cannibalism? What are you going to be ashamed of in this life, if not, eating meat? And I said to you made a comparison to quitting smoking. But, I mean, very simply, I don't see it as shameful in the same way. If someone is trying to quit smoking and they fail, they smoke cigarettes. Well, ultimately, nobody quits smoking in order to save the lives of the tobacco plants. Ultimately, the tobacco plants aren't suffering here and so on. And there aren't the same ecological and ethical arguments.
That's really a good example. So what if you saw a cigarette on the ground that was, or a cigarette in a dumpster? Like, would it be wrong for it to go in the landfill rather than you just smoke the cigarette?
Even better. Okay, so you're sitting around a table and somebody does half a line of cocaine, and then they get up and leave. They leave half a line of cocaine. So are you going to take the argument? Okay, well, it's going to go to waste otherwise. If you get up from the table, that person left, then that half a line of cocaine is going to waste. One of the reasons not to do that is because you don't want to be the kind of person who uses cocaine. Right. Not even once in a while. I want to be the kind of person who never uses cocaine. That's who I want to be.
Even
part
when you
of
have
it
the
is
opportunity, even when you're,
right. Even when it's opportunistic. Even when you didn't make the purchase.
Aren't connected to the moral choice.
You didn't make the economic choice. You didn't buy it. You didn't pay for it. But this still is partly a statement, a decision about who I am, what kind of person I want to be. I don't see that in terms of virtue ethics in the strict sense. I see that as aspirational. What kind of person do I aspire to be? I aspire to be the kind of person who doesn't compromise, who never uses cocaine, etc. And I want to be the kind of person who never eats meat. And those are two totally attainable goals, as long as you don't get into making these kinds of excuses for yourself.
Yeah.
All right, so that's it. 11 minutes of me saying, I think this video should have been 2 minutes long.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I mean, talk about making a mountain out of a molehill. Talk about baking cake without any flour. I think that this is just making a controversy out of something where, there's no controversy to be had.